And again, like what we talked about, that hallucination has not been fully solved yet, where context is lost. After like a few parameters, you start losing those
So you
contexts.
won't really fully trust it to fully execute. There has to be
Yes.
like an AI manager
Yes.
or, you know,
So what most companies do
watchers
today, they
across the
call it
way.
like human in the loop, where the AI is doing the stuff, but somebody is reviewing and ensuring that
every step of the way.
every step of the way.
You are welcome to the Automating Inequality podcast.
Hi, my name is Blaise Abo, and you are welcome to another episode of the Automating Inequality podcast, where we speak to founders, senior executives, researchers, people who are bullish on AI. On my left here is co-founder, CEO, Rayda Co, Francis Osifo. Hi, Francis. How do you do?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Awesome. So let's talk Rayda.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you and what is Rayda?
That's a great question. My name is Ogochukwu Francis Osifo. I'm actually Nigerian. I'm a Nigerian.
Okay.
And I enjoy everything technology. I've been in tech for over 15 years now. An entrepreneur. This is my TED company. And probably I've angel invested for the last 2-3 years now. Rayda is, as a business, we enable companies to buy, manage, and recycle IT equipment for their global team. One of the biggest pain points I realized from my last business was, as companies grew and had multiple offices, it became a nightmare for IT to deploy IT equipment to new hires in time, manage that, and recover them when those employees leave. So that's what we do.
Oh, more or less asset management.
Yes. We basically help. What we hear a lot of the time is that IT ends up becoming logistics. And we're like, that is not IT's core work in the business. So what we do is come in and say, hey, IT, focus on what your core responsibility is. And let's ensure that the relationship or the experience for a new employee globally is seamless and the same. And that works smoothly for the business, essentially.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So, Francis, what categories of businesses use Rayda?
Today, again, we didn't start from where we are at the moment.
Okay.
Again, that's also like the nature of startups and businesses evolving, right? But today, what you will find is companies of all sizes. But usually our ideal customer profile are more IT companies that have 100+ employees across multiple countries globally. Today, we service 170 countries across the world.
Okay.
But they are basically we work with the IT teams in those businesses to ensure all of their teams, irrespective of the country where they are based, get all of the equipment they need from day one. That experience is smooth and managed completely. And when the employee leaves or is laid off, we handle all of the recovery, recycling of those equipment, and redeployment when a new hire is made.
So your business helps these hires get started immediately, get going immediately.
Yeah, because the biggest thing we usually hear is a company hires an employee in Singapore or in the Philippines or in Nigeria or in Kenya, and usually it then takes them weeks to get a device
to deploy.
Yes, usually we are able to cut that from weeks to days. So on an average today, an employee, irrespective of the country where they are being hired in, we can get them a working equipment within 3 to 4 business days.
Okay. Oh wow, that's nice. So in 1900s, about 47% of the U.S. working economy were on the farms, and about 1950, that number reduced by about 70%. Now think about it. That happened because of the automation that came from machineries, automobiles, and all of that. Now we're seeing that happen again when AI space where people are doing faster, like we previously said, right? Working faster, shipping quickly. Now that is a whole new bunch of perspective, a whole new opportunity, a whole new space being created.
Yeah.
So my question is, based on how you see this, your perspective, what kind of jobs, what kind of opportunities, what kind of markets do you think this onslaught of AI is going to create?
I think that's a very interesting question. I have listened to a lot of people talk about their own view of the future. And again, everybody is making a lot of assumptions. Nobody fully is able to grasp what that will look like. But I think that we're on the cusp of 2 potential pathways. Again, how that eventually paves out, again, in how I say it, how that paves out will be interesting to see. I think like you've mentioned, with every single wave of innovation or technology, certain jobs have been lost, certain new jobs have been created. So like you mentioned, you lost all of the guys that were using like cutlasses, especially for like large commercial farms, working to like tractors.
Yeah.
And that even the manufacturing plants or whatever, that changed how goods were produced.
Yes.
I think that what we are seeing again, like we talked about, is now with AI, is you will see certain roles, especially like roles that are again one of the things, the use case a lot of people try and think about, like for AI, is automating repetitive and manual tasks because it removes the room for error, right? It removes like fatigue, it removes all of those bias, ideally, right? So you see use cases now that are very, very strong that we're already seeing strong push for is like things like customer support, right? Where again you have AI models that can speak the language, that can respond in certain tones, and can respond 24 hours of the day. So in certain of those kind of industries, you'll probably see those jobs evolving or almost phasing out completely in some sense when it gets to maturity, right? We are seeing AI models even getting to the point where people are trying to bring them in for like sales. In fact, I remember there's a company I saw where they're literally building the AI employee. And the context is that you have an employee that is HR or sales. So again, he knows all of those job functions specifically, and you can define his KPIs, and he goes about acting.
So all of those, hence AI agents, yeah?
Yeah. And there was a funny scenario somebody was painting that you get to the point where companies have AI employees, right? So again, the question then starts becoming, if everything in the business becomes AI employees, where is the role of the human in the loop?
You know, so that picture, CEO of Google said that 25% of code of Google's code that is being written by AI.
Yeah. I think again, which is where I think it's also where it's very different, right? There's the school of thought where actually like from code where people are trying to get like a matured senior developer, that AI developer, right? That is able to write the entire code. He has context, he gives a requirement, and he just goes out to build that.
Okay.
I don't think we are there yet. A lot of the tools I've seen that I've played around with, they can build baseline MVPs. So it works, it gets the job done. But again, if you're thinking about having a lot of people on that application, the security of that application, those systems are not able to think through all of those loops yet. And again, like what we talked about, that hallucination has not been fully solved yet, where context is lost. After like a few parameters, you start losing those contexts.
You won't really fully trust it to fully execute. It has to be like an AI manager.
Yes.
Or, you know,
so what most companies do, they call it like human in the loop, where the AI is doing the stuff, but somebody is reviewing and ensuring that
every step of the way.
Every step of the way. But again, like I said, 20-30% of that work is already done. So I can then build on top of that, and then is learning and improving over time. But again, you know that if there's room for error, that error can become really, really, really terrible and horrible. Again, garbage in, garbage out, right? If the data or the learning it is picking up is wrong, then fundamentally that problem becomes a lot more deeper. And we have started seeing it like things like bias, where maybe AI is responding to, you ask a question about maybe a particular group of people and it doesn't want to respond or something.
Oh, yes.
And so you start seeing like, again, it's based on the learning data or the training data, right? So that's like the world we are entering in, where
every one of them have one or two errors that still persists.
Exactly. So it's never really that. I feel like it will be where that evolves into. I also have like a very apocalyptic view of what AI could lead into, and I used to say,
"We'll get there. We're gonna get there. Don't jump, just relax. We'll get there." So let's talk about agentic AI. You know, AI agents being able to do multiple things on their own. You know, and all of that. Take up multiple tasks. Having an AI agent, multiple things, having them being able to even collaborate, co-communicate, and co-deliver, right? And, you know, again, all of these things are things that are new, let me call them fads, right? But to you, what would this solve for it to be truly transformative?
I think we're already seeing the transformation happen because, and I'll give you an instance, a lot of even customers we deal with today, a lot of companies, large companies we see, there's a huge push for automation. In fact, it's the most interesting thing I think I've seen in the last couple of months, where you're speaking to a lot of businesses and they're like, look, we want zero touch, zero touch, zero touch, zero touch. So we are entering that era of zero touch where people want the value your software, your system's service is not that, oh, I can click around. I want to be able to chain things together and then know that it runs 100% true every single time. You know, I don't have to do anything else as long as all conditions are true, right? So it's almost like a set up and forget. The same way you think like a direct debit. I set it up and I forget and I move on. So to your point, the way I think about like all of the agentic AI, and I think the guys that have kind of figured it out is build agents that do one thing and do that one thing really well. It's the same way you would think about like in programming, some people will call it like microservices, where you have a service or an application or a small monolith, a small application that you've built that just sends email. And this sends just SMS.
And it does it very well.
And that's the only thing it does. So he's expecting an input of certain parameters. And the minute he receives that parameters, his job is to go out, send the email and say, hey, I've sent the email, and that's it. And so that's what we are gradually seeing being replicated in agents, where you build a single agent that his job is to send email and learn from all of the inputs and the responses and the performance of that email. And so I can then change the other service to say, hey, this guy's job is to send that offer letter. So once this guy sends out an offer letter, he's waiting for a response that it has been signed. Once it is signed, notify this other agent that is supposed to then maybe send out an equipment, right?
Oh, okay.
And when that equipment is confirmed as delivered, trigger something else. And so you can see that you can then tie up that chain, and maybe they can all even be listening for each other's responses to say, hey, when this then happen, notify me. And so you could build almost an entire workflow. You could automate that entire journey. In fact, I know of certain companies that are doing that today where they're like, nobody touches anything. Everything is already automated from this is calling this 3, 4, 5 platforms doing 4, 5, 10 things.
Okay.
And it's all plugged into different systems and they are all happening behind the scene.
Simultaneously. Okay, engineer. I want you to bring out the engineer part of you now. Okay. Right? So engineer, what is the difference between what we're currently experiencing now with the agentic AI and the rapid process automation that we used to have just in recent years?
I think again, it's obviously like, it wasn't that there wasn't a lot of like process automation that has already happened initially previously. I think that again, like we talked about, is you have AIs that again could add context, that could ask questions, that could provide a very different paradigm of thinking, as opposed to the human did all of that, right? So again, it's beyond just chaining those loops. It's also about like the thinking process to actually arriving at those solutions, right? Especially again, if you're like complex stacks. So if I say, oh, I'm trying to achieve, this is the goal, because, and this is one of the biggest thing I think, even when I was speaking with an organization recently, I was brought in to speak with their team, and I was telling them about the biggest thing a lot of the time people get so logged into is about, we want to get to that location, and you've tied yourself that this is the only way to get there, as opposed to this is the goal. Again, if you say 2 + 2 gets you 4, if the goal is 4, there are multiple equations I can create on the other side to get me to 4. 3 + 1, 2 + 2, 4 - 0. At the end of the day, it still all gets me to 0. To 4. So in that context is, if you actually are setting like this is the goal for this agent, then it has a lot of room to then explore how does it achieve that goal. As opposed to you've already defined the parameter, which means that if anything were to deviate, because human life is not always straightforward, there's always complexity.
Exactly.
So it means that if anything was to deviate from that, the entire system would not know how to respond. So
and it's not like a human being yet that can evolve based on its circumstances.
Exactly. So again, if you give it a lot of context, you can then say, hey, this is what we are trying to achieve. Let's try this method. Okay, we've tried this method. That didn't achieve the goal. We can try multiple approach until that problem is solved. And then it's also like self-debugging, right? Which is the most interesting
part. Learning along the way.
Yeah, so I've tried this. This is the error I got. Okay. Let's try and resolve this error. We've tried it multiple times. Okay, this approach is not working. Maybe let's try a different method. Again, the goal is to achieve the goal and not necessarily about the method that helps us achieve the goal. We can always change that method.
No, okay, great. Yeah. So I just call you engineer again, right? Because we're going to the technical part of this right now. I've used Corso. I've used
I have a 2-year subscription for Corso.
I have VO. I have a subscription for that as well. And I know there are likes of Copilot, GitHub Copilot,
there's Replit,
and the rest of them.
Both.
How is this affecting engineers? Right? Maybe those on your team, maybe you yourself, people around you. What is the outlook like for this in under 10 years?
I think again, what the outlook will be is going to be very interesting. Again, seeing the pace at which all of this has happened already, I think it will be interesting. There are two ways I think about it. The first one is today is one. I feel like all of these tools should ideally help you accelerate. Again, accelerate as an engineer. It should accelerate your work fundamentally, right? What that means is, for instance, now I could take a Figma design and move that into like VO or into both, and it will give me all of the front end code already mobile responsive. So it means that a lot of the front end engineer is spending his time not doing Figma translation to code, but actually just integrating APIs.
Okay.
Which again would have been a lot of time, first of all, to translate that design into front end code, make it responsive. You could do all of that now in a matter of minutes, right? For $20 a month, right? So again, it means that there's a lot of speed.
Minutes. This is something that normally would take like 3 months to do.
Yes, it will take a lot of time, especially if you have lots of screens that you need to translate.
But you're saying 3 months work cut down to like 3 minutes?
Cut down into minutes. Code ready to go that you can already move into your repo and start work, right? Something like VO or like Cursor, you could actually, again, there are people that are using it from like code completion, right? As you're writing your code is trying, because it has that context, it's auto completing. It's predicting what the next line is and then almost completing it. And you can accept it or say, oh, this is not what I'm trying to do. And it's obviously kind of trying to learn that context and improve. And in some cases, you could actually just ask it to write out, hey, this is what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, build it out.
And it could build out and then you can decide to accept it or reject whatever suggestion.
To development.
Yes. You know, I've seen people use, again, which is actually for like is a great use case for building like MVPs. You have an idea, you want to quickly test it out. We are already in an era where it shouldn't take you more than a weekend to be able to build out something you can quickly use to test out your idea and to figure out if there's any interest in it. We are entering the era where it is not going to be so much of the difficulty in coding, at least the MVP. Is about, is there demand and can you sell the product?
Okay.
You know, that is where we are at the moment. In terms of the long-term thinking, I think that the biggest part will be exploring how those evolve as well. Like I mentioned, if you think about like no-code tools, when websites, there was an era where you had to go talk to a developer to build a website.
Yeah.
We got to an era where platforms like WordPress or all of these other drag and drop platforms started existing, where an engineer wasn't necessarily required.
Yes.
But sometimes based on the complexity of what still needed,
you still need an engineer.
You still need an engineer. So again, even though we will get to that point where you could build a lot of stuff with AI end to end, based on certain complicated products or systems and the security and the audience you're selling it to, you still will need engineers. So those engineers will probably still be using AI to augment, but you will need a human.
So hence, AI is not going to take their jobs.
Not all of the jobs.
Okay, so typically in a single sentence, what do you think is the ultimate job of the future?
I think it's an embed, is an AI embedded in whatever that role is, whatever that title is. For certain roles, it will fully disappear. Again, let's not kid ourselves, right?
Okay.
For certain roles, AIs will completely reshape that entire segment completely. But for certain roles, what you will see is a natural fit. Even for those segments where there will be a massive, maybe 80%, 90% clean out of those segments.
Okay.
The guys that would evolve and survive the most will be guys that have figured out a way to leverage AI in their workflow, in their process. So whatever you do, figure out how you can become a lot more better leveraging AI technology across board. Okay,
good. So now the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said that SaaS is dead. Do you think so?
I think, again, it's also like the use case for what kind of SaaS. Again, everybody can make he has very different context. But the way I see the word is that I don't think SaaS is dead. I think that, again, whatever we describe it, people don't care what terminology we call it, SaaS, PaaS, whatever it is, or mobile apps. At the end of the day, is solutions that solve problems for people would never disappear. Case closed.
Okay.
Whether it's a SaaS or whatever the case is, at the end of the day, humans just want a solution that solves their problem. As long as you are solving a problem for an audience that have the ability to pay you for that problem, you would always be in business. That's how I think about it. So I don't see it as, SaaS or this. I see it fundamentally as solve problems for an audience that the problem is a deep enough problem that they care about, and they have the resource to pay for it. And you will always be useful irrespective of the technology or innovation that is at pace at that point in time.
Okay, great. So a few days ago, I was watching a video from Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, about their early beginnings, 1995. He said at the time, the likes of Silicon Computers, right? Those that made the graphics for the games we're playing, the N64 and all of that at the time, that these guys were spending millions of dollars for graphics that were generating those games, right? But today, you can get these graphics machines from $300 to $600 to $8,000. Now, that is how quick technology has helped us achieve and evolve things, right? Now, we are shipping things faster. All of a sudden, you can just type a prompt and generate video.
Generate an image.
Generate image. Generate animation. Right?
Generate games. Or you can, so that is, be changing your
that
as you
is
play
making computer generating graphics accessible at almost nothing because these are free. Do you think we are moving too fast?
But that's the thing.
Because now here's my point. Because all of these things are amazing. They are present. That's our reality. But there are those who are still not aware of this reality.
That's true.
So what do you think?
Again, I think that if you think about it, even if you go to certain cities, and I used to say that, again, even for us with technology, we are still caught, we are within the certain bubble of an audience, irrespective of the country or the society. Obviously, every society is very different, right? They are very advanced or very developed societies. But if you go to even the most developed countries, you still find audience of people that are not as caught up to technology with the most up-to-date audience in that city or in that country, right? So I don't think that will ever disappear, right? We are in that frontier because again, we know so that's why we feel that way. But for a certain person, he doesn't really care that much. He probably has other things. He's dealing with bills. He's dealing with cost of living crisis. He's dealing with other things. He's just trying to survive. Yeah. So it's like, he's not thinking about that deeply about how AI and all of this, because again, it's like, look, I'm trying to just survive. I'm just trying to eat. And
I need to eat first. I need to put food on my table.
On my table first. If I start AI will come back later on. So I think that is the subtle nuance or difference that I think fundamentally. And I don't think that will ever change. Even when we get, again, like I said, I have a very apocalyptic view about how that will end up being, where you obviously will see people where they are in the cusp of what is happening in technology. We are building all of this stuff, which is amazing. And all of that fast pace is not going to change. But you will find certain people that would not be able to catch up with that technology innovation. It's almost like social networks. If you think about, and I read an interesting story a while ago about that. If you think about, every generation have their own social network. Right? Yeah. So there's the audience that is still caught like in Facebook. Facebook is their home. Right? But there is a generation that, my parents are in Facebook. I don't want to be in the social network where my parents are.
So do you think this rapid AI evolution, do you think it's advancing inequalities?
That's a big one. I think that part of it fundamentally is that, one, it is technology that is available to everybody, right? Like, again, you can use it. Anybody, anywhere can use it, fundamentally. And like I mentioned again, depending on what thankfully, most of these AI models, they are available that you can actually train it for a specific use case. So you could train it to do whatever, based on the data you give it, whatever interesting use case you want it for, right? Again, the first question is, what's the data source? What's the bias of that data? Which again leads to a whole new kettle of fish and a new set of problems. But ideally, in some senses, that it is available for anybody to be able to access them and build whatever interesting stuff they want to build. And if it doesn't kind of fully fit what you want it to, you can then figure out, okay, look, let me go take the base model and feed it new data and create a new experience that I would like to see. But in terms of generally advancing inequalities, I wouldn't. It's always a very touchy conversation to actually get into, and because again, every society or different groups have things that again they were not directly responsible for, that has kind of affected how they view the world and they perceive the world. And as somebody would say that after a certain age, it's very difficult to because it's like a programming. It's very difficult because that's the way you see the world. And it's very difficult for you to see the world very differently because again, you went through an experience, right? And yeah, it has altered who you are and how you view the world fundamentally in that sense. So again, I think that for a lot of people is technology. It could be used for good. It could be used for bad. It could be used to target a certain audience. It could be used to help a certain audience. Again, at the end of the day, it is what do you use it for? And what is the group
application responsibly used?
Yes.
Okay. So let's look at the future. Now, we know game based on what happened at CES 2025. We know gaming is the future. Autonomous engines are the future. Robotics, AI is the future. Now, let's talk about your experience at San Francisco using Waymo.
Yeah.
I always want to ask you about that. Now, tell us.
It was a very, very interesting experience. I think for me, again, it was just, okay, you wanted to, like, hey, this is going on.
First of all, I mean, Waymo autonomous systems, right? I mean, I haven't been in one.
Okay.
I have been, but.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, okay, so before that, I'll even tell you an interesting, I remember speaking with a cab driver and he was talking about that. It's so interesting that in his lifetime, because he was driving me in San Francisco, that in his lifetime, he's now driving, there are now cars on the road that doesn't even have drivers. You know, like that reality. And for me, it was just thinking in that, again, for my generation, we actually went full cycle, and there are generation of kids that will probably come, and that will be their normal, that will be their reality. They would never have seen somebody driving a car because their reality will be cars that are driving themselves. Anyway, I think the most interesting thing, again, everybody in San Francisco obviously wants to try that. I think it was a really, really good experience. So you order the ride, obviously. It gives you like a 2-letter code and it tells you you have like, it's almost like the Uber experience. So you can see where the car, how far away it is. And then it gets to where you are and it shows the letter on the car. So you know, so if it is like Francis, maybe Francis, Osifo, F-O. So you can see that, okay, this is for you.
This is yours.
Yeah. And then when you get close to the door of the car, you put your device close to the door and then that opens the door. And then you sit and then it has like a welcome. It gives you like, and then it has like a small dashboard right behind you, just beside, if you're sitting on the back seat, that is showing you like almost like a scan of the entire road as it's driving. So it's showing you every single object and obstacle on the way. And it's very interesting. It's like, oh, if there's any issue, you could press from the device to call the Waymo team to get like support. And then when it stops you, the door opens and then the ride ends. I think the most interesting thing, obviously, or the one interesting I saw a couple of times were cases where he parked in the middle of the road. And so, yeah, there was a bit of like, oh, traffic of vehicles waiting and like, hey, so he didn't kind of properly clear out from to the side of the way to actually pick up passengers. And I saw that there was a video because I was in San Francisco for the YC alumni reunion, where a Waymo car got stopped beside like a bus. And again, they literally had to pull the car to the side. Yeah, because it was stuck. Again, technology.
No driver.
No driver. So it's also something that somebody will be like, okay, you know what, let me get in and turn the steering and move it to the side. And that's interesting. It has a steering actually. There's still a lot of work. But I think, again, they've evolved it so well that, again, it's become like the normal reality. A lot of people in San Francisco take Waymo already. And that's pretty interesting to see today.
The driver, did he seem like he was afraid that the Waymo could take their jobs?
I think that's the concern. That, again, it's still early. It hasn't gotten there.
Autonomous systems.
Yeah. And I think that there's been a lot of like data around that. Again, if we get to a fully automated system for like vehicles, the amount of errors could significantly reduce. I was actually in a friend's Tesla as well. And I remember we actually having a chat and the vehicle in front of us stopped abruptly. But thankfully, because I think I don't know the setting he had on his Tesla already detected it because, again, based on and then Tesla already like took control and like stopped the vehicle immediately. So there wasn't any like incident or accident that happened in that. So again, for me, it's like those places where that could lead to errors because of like human error or like where people like fall asleep on the wheels or gets drunk or whatever. That, again, in an ideal case, the machines would help or could help. But again, like that worry that usually people becomes that when we become overly reliant on technology, which we found even without all of this automation and all of this innovation, is if there's any breakdown on those technology, most of the humans already lose touch of how to evolve or exist without them. And that will become almost useless if there was to be any malfunction. So if you watch any of those movies where you see a post-apocalyptic world, where in the case, let's imagine
like iRobot.
Let's even not even go that far. Where, for instance, all of the telecoms network was down. It means that
yeah, for example.
Yeah, it means that, for instance, now all of the cars now on the road don't know what to do anymore. So,
I've seen the movie like that, and they're all eating themselves.
Everybody's stuck because now all of the systems they are connected to, they are reading data and connected to each other.
Truly
is lost.
dystopian. Okay, so this is a rapid question now. Physical AI, autonomous systems. There was a book I read from 1942 by Isaac Asimov. Now it's called Run Around. And in there, you have stuff around the 3 laws of robotics. Now, one of them is something around AI, robotics. A robot cannot harm a human being. But then in there, he also makes a case that a robot can eventually decide that it wants to be conscious and it wants to be sentient, and then begin to reevaluate that first law, which is do not harm a human being. Do you think we're getting there?
Again, we are seeing a lot of different innovation are going into like wars or military, right?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, which is why a lot of people are saying now the wars of the future will be very different.
Yes.
Now where you could do like very precise targeting. You could say, even though you want to attack in a crowd, you want to attack a specific person in a crowd. Again, like I said,
there's a film like that, Person of Interest.
Yeah, now you could even target them based on their genomics, for instance, and say,
oh yes, I've seen it
where again, the bombs were programmed to pass, and it's just flying around the world looking for that person.
And it's just like, just a heart attack, but then it's an actual attack.
I think that again, the world and how it evolves, again, like I said, technology is a function of the individual that is creating the technology and what they are codifying in those systems.
Okay.
We've seen it even with like social networks that anything can be used for good, but it as well could be used for bad or for evil. At the end of the day, it is the use case and whoever is
responsible use.
Yes. So again, is how do you prevent that it is not misused? We've had cases. I was reading a story of a father that talked about how he got a call that the son had actually was in an accident, hit a pregnant lady, and he was already arrested. And it sounded like his son, and he was worried that his son was in prison. He needed to bail the son out.
Oh yeah, I've seen a movie. I've seen that movie.
This is actually a movie. This is actually a real story.
Real?
Yeah, wow. And he was actually testifying in a court in the US, and that eventually, by the time he was almost about to actually make the wire because it sounded like his son. It was like the voice was like the voice of his son. And it was like, he just wanted to, he was calling his daughter to say, hey, here's what's going on with your brother. And his sister said, no, that's not possible. I'm here with him. And they like did a video call. And it was like, for him, if not that happened, he would have actually sent that money. So we're already seeing cases where people's voices are getting cloned. We are seeing a lot of like video manipulation. So
as well,
videos can be manipulated for you to present that somebody said something which they never did. It will look, sound, and feel like them. So again, we are entering a very new set of uncharted territory.
So what's your advice on everyone out there looking at these dangers?
I think that is also like what like governments are also thinking. Again, is finding that balance between no regulation and over-regulation, right? Again, just ensuring that, again, like we mentioned, how do you ensure responsible use of all of this technology? And how do you start putting, again, policy is always catching up to innovation, which is always the biggest challenge.
Innovation is always very fast.
Exactly. So again, the regulators and the governments need to start thinking about how do they catch up, because again, humans will always be humans and do so again, it's figuring out how do you balance not over-regulating where innovation is now becoming hampered, as we are seeing in certain regions, but also how do you not let it have free reign where it is now being used to the detriment of a lot of people that do not know how to leverage that technology.
So it needs to be checked at every step
as much as possible.
Okay, thank you so much, Francis, for being here. On a final note, where can people find you?
Again, I'm very easy to find. Literally, I'm on LinkedIn. Just search for Ogochukwu Francis Osifo. On my website, francisosifo.com.
What about Rayda?
Yes, definitely check out us if you have a global.
What's your website?
Is www.rayda.co. Or you just search for Rayda, ROAYDA, on Google. We are definitely going to come up. But yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Francis, for being here. Yeah.
The Automating Inequality Podcast.